All right. Welcome to another episode. I've got Jason Linett joining me today. He's a professional hypnotist, and he's using his ability to help professionals unlock success and eliminate limiting beliefs. He's the best-selling author of the book, Work Smart Business, Lessons Learned from Hypnotizing 250,000 People and Building a $1 Million Brand. And he's the host of the Hypnotic Language Hacks podcast. Jason, awesome having you today, man. Welcome to the show.
Jake, good to be here and looking forward to diving in, chatting with you and sharing some value for your audience out there.
Yeah, the funny thing is we were talking right before I hit record here, and I was
let's just have that conversation again. So that'll
yeah, for sure. No. I was apologizing. I was hey, excuse the space, the lighting. I'm just moving upstairs in my house, the office up here, and I haven't done a podcast up here early in the morning yet. And I'm out here in Idaho. It's 7 o'clock, so I guess it's not that early, but the sun's not out yet. I have great natural light in this room, but man, it's not set
right
up
now
for it today. So if you're watching on YouTube, excuse the shadows and whatnot.
Or for those listening to the podcast right now, we're both in professional studios with audiences, and it's full cinematic quality. We wish you could see it.
For sure.
Don't check us up on YouTube though, but yeah.
I love it, Jason, man. Thanks for that. I'm apologizing to people who can't see me.
Right.
This is just the world that we're in right now. So, hey, you're out in Orlando. I understand you moved out there within the last year or two. How do you like Orlando, man?
I love it. And part of that story was that going back to like 2017, most of my business had already gone online, whether it was the training programs, the online communities that I run, or even in the work, the origin of what I do started as being the hypnotist working with clients one-to-one for personal change. And well, let's riff off this for a quick moment, that there's 3 reasons why hypnosis is just as effective in online as it is in person. The first is once the hypnosis process begins, you close your eyes and you listen to the hypnotist. So if that's the situation, why do we need to be in the same room? Second of all, in full respect to the various offices I opened up over the years, change never occurred in the room. Change occurred in your head. So wherever you've got your head, Jake, we can do the work. Okay. Third part, and this is why I had moved it online, and there were traces of this even before online platforms were ready, which would be that rather than drive to an office and have to role play the problem, most of my clients these days kind of mirror this story, working with entrepreneurs, business owners who have fears of putting themselves out there, whether it's fear of public speaking, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's confidence in their message. And I'd say to them, it's like, you didn't have that issue sitting in my office in a comfortable recliner. Let's do the work in the place where you want to notice the change. And because of that dialogue, fast forward the story, when it's March of 2020 and the kids got sent home from school and they didn't go back for 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And my wife and I looked around and went, oh, we can do this anywhere. Let's go travel. Let's keep everything running. And as we planned, and yes, cost of living Northern Virginia compared to Orlando, Florida, we would, why do we need to go back?
Yeah,
so that was the journey of moving. And the thought was, you hear, all the dialogues around preparing for retirement, and let's live that lifestyle even as we're still doing what we do.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, like, I guess I never really put 2 and 2 together that you could do, and I know this was in your one-on-one space, but do hypnosis remotely. So like, there's no real interference in kind of the dialogue with, I don't know. It just sounds different. Like when we're talking over the air like this, like it's different than if you and I were in the same room right now. So that doesn't have an impact on somebody who's going into like a hypnotic state.
Not at all. No. And I'd expand this dialogue even beyond the extremely micro niche thing that I do and bring it out to everybody else, which would be in life. When you ask better questions, you often get better answers. So rather than what I have to admit behind the scenes, a lot of people in my other communities would go to the dialogue about, well, what can't you do? Why is it not as effective? And I'm off to the side going, hey, what if we ask the question differently? What can we do better? How can we, so I'll give an example in a training event. And let's go with the truth of the story first. This was an accident that now we claim was intentional. And that's a bit of gray area on the story, which is that here's training events that I would do. And classically, your easiest format for teaching any skill set, set some opening frames, give a bit of a preamble in terms of what you're about to teach, either give a walkthrough or a demonstration that's going to be different based on everyone else's specialties that's out there in this audience. And then third, open up for Q&A and then give them workshop time. So follows the classic formula. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, give them time to practice it. So since 2010, I had been teaching workshops and hosting meetups, and the cameras were always running. And so we had in our video library this one technique that I would do with people that there's like 8 or 9 videos of it. And what happened was I've got an amazing web designer who's worked with me for years. And I say to her, hey, this is the one, the feature at the top of the page. This is the one with the description. So put them together. But then go to the Vimeo library and, pick one of those videos and just put it as a bonus underneath it. Jake, she put all the videos. So like the situation was on a training page, demo, explanation, and then like 7 more demos. And her quality of work is so good, I usually don't have to check up on her. And suddenly I'm getting feedback. Jason, it's amazing that you showed us just how universal this strategy is, how you customized it to all these different people for all these different issues. And I'm hearing this and I have to go look and go, oh. So now, and admittedly, let's use professional terminology, it would suck if it was a live event in person and I spent the entire day demoing the same method over and over. And instead, students on their own time can go in and review the nuances, see the different applications. So right there, change the question, you get a better answer. I think back to, and this might be why I switched accountants years ago. Well, Jason, my schedule's kind of full. When do you want to come in and review the numbers? We're doing everything in QuickBooks, right? Can we just like connect on Zoom and just walk through it together? This is why we left Northern Virginia as well. It's only 5 miles away, but that's a 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of industry still that the last 2 years in this world, have kind of opened up people's eyes to, let's say, market viability, that there's different ways of approaching it. I'm working with a personal trainer right now, who I'm the client. And yes, he's the other side of Florida, but we've not met in person. We check in once a week. He gives me the recommendations of what to do. And admittedly, I'm seeing some of the best results ever. So again, change the questions, you get a much better answer. But no, it's not the magic of being in the same space. And the classic phrase that sales 101, satisfy objections before they arise. So I'm explaining how this becomes more effective. And these are statements we found to be true. They're not things we made up because they sound good and say them with confidence. No, it's just by testing the process, I can say, well, the client work is now the smallest part of what I do. Most of my time is now spent with business owners in terms of empowering their communication to have their ideal audience wanting more from them before they make the sales offer. That though I still have my toes in the one-to-one clients, I gotta say I'm seeing the best results I've ever seen. And part of it is we don't have this burden of travel and scheduling, and it's all become so much more convenient.
That's awesome. The next most important question here is, are you hypnotizing me right now?
We already did it 2 hours ago. You're doing fantastic, Jake. That's right.
Thanks, dude.
I'm not working hard today. Well, I'd say it this way. My first entry into this, and I'm sure there's some people in this audience who have maybe not perhaps read books specifically on hypnosis, but there's tenets of something called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which the quick history lesson of that were 2 brilliant people who were doing a human modeling exercise. Let's find people who are successful at what they do and track it, ask the right questions at the right time. Sounds familiar. And by tracking it, we can replicate their strategies. And the modern day version of this, without ever formally studying NLP, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Work Week, 4-Hour Body, 4-Hour Chef, the man embodies these principles without, as far as I know, the last time I listened to his show, without ever officially studying it. So in the origins of NLP, they were tracking 3 people, all of whom were therapists originally, one of whom was sort of the godfather of hypnosis at the time. It then expanded into business and communication, which is where you could, read through any one of the Russell Brunson books, and here comes an NLP term. You can listen to sales trainers, and they'll talk about some of these terms at times. And inside of it, there came this phrase, and this is even before I officially got into all of this, was that these were principles that were not invented. They were instead discovered by tracking effective communicators and asking, how did they do this? So when I read that, the thought was, if this is based upon effective communication, and my definition of that is that effective communication means that, was there an intent of the communication? Was it mutually beneficial? Let's always come at this from an ethical perspective. And did we get the outcome? So if that's the situation, if all of this is based upon effective communication, why does this have to be something we choose to turn on or turn off? Why don't we just communicate effectively at all times? So it's where, let's see, we're coming up, at least here in the US, and sort of the midterm elections. There'll be a major political cycle in 2 years. They never stop, apparently. And there may be the moments where you hear, this candidate's using this language pattern, this one's using this language pattern. Well, again, if we track how effective communicators speak, you can pull these methodologies out of it. There are some who may do it a bit more organically, and to their credit, I give the Tim Ferriss story, don't yet realize exactly what they're doing. I'd say his is more on the strategy side. Yet it's where, again, if we're keeping someone's attention, if we're guiding to the next step, if we're, as we say, having people want more from us as the communication continues, it's not that I'm teaching business owners to do hypnosis. It's that instead I'm teaching them how to let their communication become even more hypnotic.
So from trying to find the best way to phrase this question, I'll just go ahead and shoot off the hip here. Being a hypnotist, I think a lot of people may associate the state of hypnosis as a mental trick. Like you're tricking someone's body into being kind of subservient to, or open to suggestion. Coming at NLP from the lens of somebody who's a professional hypnotist, I imagine you probably get some criticism that this is like tricky business, or that it might feel, at least on the outside, like disingenuous. But what you're saying is like, you're just teaching people how to communicate effectively, and that the core tenets of this is rooted in this kind of ideology or methodology. I want you to expand on this a little bit more.
Yeah. And I share, this is a familiar dialogue, and not to play the game of patting myself on the back, but this is the same dialogue that had to occur before they let me do a TED Talk a couple of years ago. This is the same dialogue of going into a conference, or being invited to do a webinar or live stream for someone else's community, which there's a lesson that comes out of this. In the words of a modern day wise philosopher by the name of Taylor Swift, haters gonna hate. And there's these things on the web called trolls. So, we run ads on Facebook and other platforms. And admittedly, if we don't lead with the statement, no, it's not about tricking or manipulating people, it's instead about moving towards a mutually positive outcome. If we don't lead with that statement in some of the ads, we get all these weird comments down beneath it. And instead, the ad spend drops when we call out the objection from the start. So for anybody out there, consider what may be some of the reasons where people hold back. So don't let what I'm about to say be a dialogue only specifically about what I do and what I share with people. There's nuances to this, to almost everyone's business that's out there. How's that for a 3-minute preamble before we actually get into the answer here? So the real answer becomes, I've got to call out the way that I do it, which is a bit differently than others, which is every piece of content in our business, whether we know it or not, acts like a magnet. It either is going to attract in the ideal clientele who are a fit for what we do, or let's throw in the modifying word, respectfully repel away the people who are not a fit. So I talk in terms of checkpoints of communication so that people will only move to the next step of the communication as long as it's right, as long as it's positive, as long as it's congruent for them. So I say in everyone's business, don't necessarily sell the service, don't necessarily even sell the results, that you need to hit those other 2 points in all that you do. What you really ought to be doing is selling the next step, where people are figuratively, if not literally, raising their hands and saying, I want more. Because think about what's going to happen differently in your business when you're already talking to people who are basically pre-sold on what you do. So the result of this becomes we're only advancing to the next step of the journey as long as it's congruent, as long as it's beneficial with that person. We got some time for me to share a quick teaching lesson of this?
Let's do it, man. This is
okay. Yeah, because this is going to illustrate it better than anything else. There's a thing that I teach inside of our hypnotic influence for premium sales community, which I call, and they always say, you need to, my phrase for this is thingify. You need to make your thing that you teach a specific, memorable, branded title. That way your community can call it out by name.
Okay.
We haven't done that yet with this one. Because this is the double 3-act structure for more confident sales.
Okay.
We'll come up with a catchier name later on.
No, I like it.
Yeah, the double 3-act structure for more confident sales. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Imagine if somewhere in your content, whether it's video, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a social media post, in the midst of giving the call to action to take the next step, because this is a process that begins with you. And the way that this works is that we'll connect together for a call and we'll talk about your goals so I can learn more about what you'd like to achieve. Then from there, I'll open up some time if you've got questions for me so I can explain exactly what I do and how it can work for you. And then if I'm confident that I can help you out, then I'll explain how we can get started as soon as possible. There's a link down below to click a button, pick a time on my calendar. Look forward to speaking with you soon. So that's the structure as an example of a part of a call to action, where I've set an expectation as to how this process is going to play out, which this does a couple of things just to nerd out on the hypnotic language hacks inside of it. We're future pacing you into the experience. My take on this is something I call product pacing, that by describing the experience, you are running that sequence in your mind, which, let's call it out, is taking away some of the fear someone may have about calling a business, connecting, because that's a very logical construct in terms of how the communication is going to play out. We'll talk about your goals. I'll explain in further detail what I do, and you can ask me questions. And then here's the qualifier. If I'm confident I can help you out, I'll explain how we can get started as soon as possible. Here comes the call to action, which is why there's a link down below to schedule time on my calendar, and we'll talk soon. So they go through that series of actions. That action acts as a pre-qualifier before they get on the call. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Here comes the second one, because again, it's a double 3-act structure. Hey, Jake, thank you so much for scheduling this time with me here today. And I got to tell you, I'm so excited to chat with you. I looked over what your goals are. And the way that this obviously works is we'll spend some time talking about your goals so I can get a better idea in terms of what you'd like to achieve. Then from there, we've got time. You can ask me whatever questions you've got, and I can further explain exactly what I do and how it works. And then from there, if I'm confident I can help you out, I can explain how you can get started as soon as possible. Make sense?
Yes, it
Which
does.
Clearly, if that was not in congruence with you, you probably wouldn't have scheduled the call, and you probably wouldn't have accepted at the beginning of the call. And I do have to tell a story, which is around this, which is a time where I didn't intend to get the sale as quickly as I did, and not to throw others under the bus, but clearly she was calling around. And the first call was, phone rings, they pick up. Yeah. Oh, is this? She asked for the business. Oh, hang on. Mom! Which that instills confidence.
Yeah.
The second one, and I wish I could have heard this one from her telling of it, was, hey, is this Joe the business? Oh, yeah, hang on. Hi, this is Joe's Wellness Center. So like clearly it was the same dude. And he put on an act to go into business mode. Uh, in our call, in the opening 15 seconds, I set the foundation for where we were going to go. We're going to talk about your goals. I'll explain what I do. If I'm confident I can help you out, I'll explain how we can get started. She goes, in that one moment, I felt this person is professional. This person clearly gets what they're doing. And I felt at ease, and everything we then talked about enhanced the decision I'd already made. Now, the question you brought up was ethics and manipulation and the concern around that, to which I'd say, I talk about these themes in both my promotion and my courses because, and I tell stories where I may be on a call with someone and I'm not a web designer, I'm not a graphic designer. That's why I said nice things about the woman who works with me. And if that's what they're looking for, I'm hearing what they need is not necessarily what I do, to which I may explain, hey, I'm on the fence here because here's what I do. Here's the shape of it. I'll send you a video so you can see inside. We do have some graphic designers in the community, which you might network with them there, but tell me if I'm the right next step for you. On the hypnosis side of things, you know, the phrase is always my scope of practice dialogue is when in doubt, don't. And this is the extreme. The phone rang a number of years ago. Yeah, I've got these voices in my head and they're starting to tell me some pretty violent things. Can you help out with that? And it's not dangerous. It's only dangerous if someone's taking on a client that they're not qualified to help. And, my response was to meet their enthusiasm and go, I think I could help, but I think my friend Jeff would be a better fit. I think Jeff works with this situation better, leaving out the fact that Jeff was actually this doctor of psychiatry who specialized in dissociative personality. And I'm not going to put someone in a situation where clearly there may be a better fit. So it's a shared ethical consideration, really, is the answer to your question. If we think about the nature of the structure of the user experience, where again, we all know funnel marketing, and what you really heard from the story is I'm intentionally teaching people to put themselves deeper at the end of that funnel, because now only the people who can get to that step are the ones who have pre-qualified themselves. And all of your marketing, that magnetic metaphor of only bringing in the right people, and just simply put, I'm not going to make the offer to someone that I don't firmly believe I can help.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, there was a lot there, man. There's a lot to unpack there. Let me ask you this. This is more of a personal question is, how'd you get into hypnosis in the first place? Like what attracted you to this space?
So there's a bit of an away from motivation that kicked this off. And as a teenager, I had a hobby of close-up sleight of hand magic. And I actually competed in magic competitions, which are a thing. I kind of paid my way through college doing magic tricks, close-up sleight of hand at restaurants. You'd order, I'd swoop in, the food would arrive, I'd disappear. And I have to say, there was this frustration with it, though, which is that if someone really could do magic, would they carry around a pack of playing cards? If they could really make money appear at their fingertips, why would we be doing it with these like antique silver dollars, which how worn out those coins were was part of the secret, that they didn't make noise. That doesn't reveal too much. So I was kind of phasing out of that, as I was going into another career path. I think I was more interested in the how does this work rather than the presentation side, which is also, I was in college and then worked for a couple of years in backstage production of professional theater. So I wasn't an actor, I wasn't a designer, I wasn't the director, I was the production manager, stage manager, making all these creative people get along. If that's not psychological training, I don't know what is. And it's where the welcome week of my college, someone came and did a stage hypnosis show. And that's the first time I had ever seen it. And he was there for entertainment. And as I'm watching it, there was no need for exposition like I would have to do with the magic of, I have here a pack of cards. You can see all the cards are different. These are 1890s, Morgan Silver Dollar. Why would we have to do the exposition? It was all communication. It all happened in real time. And it was all something that everybody experienced together. And I saw this and went, I need to learn this. Jake, I made a mistake though. I went to eBay and I bought all the wrong books. So I was thinking, I'm buying all these books to learn stage hypnosis. And they were all like the now classic books of hypnotherapy, of the origins of the clinical work. So it was from there that I actually put together a program that I did for high schools, I did for corporate audiences. And it wasn't quite about being the, world's funniest show or the dirty entertainment at the Christmas party for the Honda dealership. It was instead, I would meet with the school, I would meet with the corporate group and find out what challenges are their groups facing. And how can we use the formula? We go back to Rocky and Bullwinkle, Warner Brothers, get people to laugh, to inspire them to listen was the formula. And over time, it was the people who were coming up to me after the program and, saying wonderful, positive things, but asking, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? So that's when I then went off and did the official hypnotherapy training. And I've already, mentioned some of the other parts of the story and everything we've talked about so far. It's a nice lesson when you realize that you don't fit in and you do things differently than others, which then launched a training business that we call Work Smart Hypnosis, which is now marked by a very specific category of teaching hypnotists who already do hypnosis how to do hypnosis better. So it's this journey of, finding something that was, again, based upon communication and asking the question, how can we use this to elevate people's status and help them to create a change? So I really considered, as I look back at my history, I was more so originally the stage hypnotist with the hypnotherapist heart. And I think the takeaway from that for many people out there is often what we begin with is not often where we end up. So be open to new opportunities, be open to new experiences. The business that I run now of working with business owners, coaches, course creators, consultants, and empowering their communication, their marketing, promotion with these language patterns and principles, that came about because a client came in for a fear of public speaking. And we worked together on that. And it's one of our subsequent appointments. And she had seen a video of mine speaking at a hypnosis conference. And she brings in her presentation. And she goes, hey, I found that video about how to open so that the audience wants to stick through all the way to the end of the talk, how to embed the sales journey in a very organic way in your stories. So when you make the offer at the end, they've already been telling themselves the story that they want the offer even before they've heard about the offer. Could you look at my talk? And Jake, the first thought was, that's not what you're here for. But as soon as I looked at it, it's like, oh, this is a great story. Open with it, but change the perspective this way. This section where you do your bio, it sounds a little braggy because you're talking about, I've done this, I've done that. We need to install the almost cynical question of, yeah, well, so what? Well, here's the way to structure your bio. So they're hearing, these are the benefits you provide and why they want to go with you. And that soon took over. And that's the shape of what we do nowadays.
So how often do you actually hypnotize people still? Like day to day?
Yeah. So let's kind of go through the story I just told there. So there's a period of time running a business where that was the only thing I did, of working with clients one-to-one. And time frame where I was seeing upwards of 25 to 35 individual clients on a weekly basis. And I love this phrase that comes out of vaudeville theater: the amateur changes their act, the professional changes their audience. And it's as the audience began to respond differently, I didn't remove that. There are some segments of my business that I did remove. I don't do the programs for high schools anymore. We just handed those off to someone else to serve those events. I'll still do the corporate events, but it's more from the angle that I do it now. So intentionally these days, I may, outside of like private business consulting, I do offer one-to-one of that. But in terms of working as the hypnotist, it's typically like 4 to 6 appointments a week. So I still keep myself in that. And it's, again, clients who fit into specific parameters that I've now limited it to. Which there's a story, or really a lesson that comes out of that, is that so often as a business owner progresses, as they advance in their career, and I ran into this, there was almost this feeling as to, yeah, but I'm maybe letting people down because I'm not as available to do this other thing as I did in the past. And it's as I realized that as I focus my efforts now, in addition to the one-to-one, but more so the one-to-many, it's not just the impact now of this one person at a time. It's here's all of these people, whether they're health coaches, whether they're financial advisors, whether they're therapists looking to get off the insurance model and position themselves as that expert role in terms of what's now in the medical world being coined as concierge level service, working with these people to create a greater outreach of their own impact. So there's something to be said about, having that moment of intentionally turning something down to turn up something that is going to reach a greater cause that's now inspiring you.
That's beautiful. I've only got, you said earlier, like your first exposure to this stuff was kind of a stage, comedy show or hypnosis. Like, was it a comedy show? Was it?
Yeah, it was a comedy show. And there's a funny nuance to that performance, by the way, just briefly. Remember I said I was the theater major, worked briefly in backstage production theater. In the US, Actors Equity Association is the union that governs everything from Broadway to regional theater, and stage managers were a part of that union as well. So I got my union card and then left about a year later. So all of my friends in college were other theater majors at the time. And this guy who did the program, it was kind of a funny split reality in retrospect, that to his credit, he randomly brought up volunteers. Hey, if you want to be a part of the show, raise your hand. And he's pulling volunteers from different parts of the audience. And Jake, by accident, he mostly pulled up my friends. So some people in the audience were watching this and going, oh, those are all actors. This is fake. Which, no, in those programs, it's all happening in real time. It's not being put on. I do have to put in the asterisk of, depending on the skills of the hypnotist, is really the quality of the program. But I'm watching the show and I'm thinking, wow, my friends are not that good of actors and they're incredibly genuine right now. Wow, this is amazing. I have to learn this.
Man,
They hate that I tell that story, but none of them are actors anymore. So
I saw, man, had to have been like 10, 12 years ago. Maybe even a little longer than that. I saw Jay Medicine Hat.
Yep. So I used to live I grew up in Virginia Beach, and then I lived in Northern Virginia after college. I never got a chance to meet Jay, but he's a guy that would do the program. I was a teenager at the time, and the man did not do the most family-friendly of programs.
No, he didn't. And that's what I was going to get into as well. One of my best buddies, he ended up pulling him up on stage. And to this day, it's funny because if you say the word, because he's like, if I give you a word, like you're going to recite this phrase. And so like anytime that you say the word Idaho or Boise or whatever it is around my buddy, he said like Jay Medicine Hat was more of an X-rated kind of like, or R-rated adult kind of thing. He's like, I bet you have a 3-inch pecker, like he goes off on this whole like phrase, and he still does it today, which is which is pretty awesome. So I saw that and then I'm like, well, what's the long-term like lasting effects of those types of suggestions? And I know that, we'll pivot a little bit more into the NLP and the hypnotic influence. I know I'm auguring in on like actual hypnosis.
No. I love this, which there's two things around that. One, a friend of mine up until recently had one of the shows in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And there were some even in, my hypnosis side of my communities who would go, oh, I don't like that he does that show with the bad language and the questionable things. And I go, well, first of all, context is everything. That's what the program is advertised to be. And he had a funny line as to, and some of you if you're concerned, I'm going to get you up here and make you do some silly stuff. Yeah, I will. It's what we're here for, right, people? So let's look at that for a moment. And let's go back to the strategy I shared to enhance sales earlier. He set the frame. He explained exactly what was about to happen. So let's be transparent for a moment. The people who were then volunteering for his program were consciously and subconsciously agreeing that they would be a part of that experience. So, the opposite of this, I had to play damage control for what's the professional term? A jackass,
Yeah.
who did something just stupid, which was someone did a program at a state fair. And when I shake your hand, you're going to feel the most pleasurable fill in the blank. You got the idea.
Yeah.
There's
I'm gonna have an
families.
orgasm at the
There's
fair.
families in the audience.
Yeah.
It's a state fair with children, and mom, what's going on? And you idiot.
Yeah.
You don't do that there. Yet here's the guy who had the show in Vegas advertised as the R-rated program, and well, he delivered what was promised. So again, as long as the context is set, all good. There's a reason why you can't be, what was it? I had a client years ago. I haven't thought of this in years. She was like, well, I brought my kids to the movie theater, and it was this movie with that funny guy, Jonah Hill, and it was just the most crass, offensive movie ever. It's like, well, it was the movie called The Sitter, which maybe wasn't one of his best, but it was R-rated, and you brought your 7-year-old.
Yeah. Well,
How we out tour, let the buyer beware.
Funny story here. I got I was a kid, man. I was in, I don't know, maybe late middle school, probably middle school-ish age. And, this dates me to be maybe a little younger here, but my, a good friend of mine's grandma decided to take us to a movie together. She's like, let's go to a movie. I'm like, yes, let's go to a movie. It was Shallow Hal with Jack Black. Yep. Right. And
with the best Tony Robbins movie cameo ever.
I agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
I think it's his only, so I guess we can fairly say it's his best one, but
but she on the way to the movie, like we were talking about what the movie was going to be. And it's about this guy, which clear in the previews. It's about a guy named Hal, who's a really shallow person that probably eventually gets it. Right. And just like figures it out how not to be such an asshole.
Yeah.
And she had us walk out of the theater like 30 minutes into it.
So this is where I have to tell you that I was at a anniversary screening of Blazing Saddles at 6 years old with my grandmother.
There you go.
This is where it helps to know that half of my family were somewhere between Russian and Polish Jews. The other half of the family were Southern Baptist pig farmers. There's a combo. And it's in a neighborhood that no one else has a Jewish background.
Sure.
So this movie, and there's a scene where here's the Indian played by Mel Brooks, and he's speaking in Yiddish.
Yeah.
And my earliest memory of sitting in a movie theater is that moment where she would laugh, no one else would. She'd then turn around to the audience and explain the joke, and then everyone else would laugh.
That's so funny.
Followed by, I think I was 10 or 11 sitting front row watching George Carlin with my parents.
Oh my God.
And as my wife and I like to say, oh, that explains everything. Where were we going with this?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd say, the question about, how does let's expand the answer here. And this is something to be aware of, even in terms of setting new behaviors, even in terms of changing what we do. I'll call it out. Years ago, and let me share a mashup of two well-known quotes in the business world. The first I'll paraphrase, which is one from Jay Abraham about letting it become your moral responsibility to serve the client.
Right.
And that goes back to everything we talked about earlier about the ethics side of this. Then here's Frank Kern talking about how the income you create is directly proportionate to the offers you create. And I took these two and kind of mushed them together. And what it became, full credit to both gentlemen, is the quality and the quantity of the impact you create in your marketplace is directly proportionate to the quality and the quantity of the offers that you make. So when I kind of hit that epiphany, this would have been 2015, 2016 or so, that's where I went, okay, so I need to make it burning desire. Let's go Napoleon Hill on this. I need to make it a burning desire to start to put out webinars, start to write, start to put out more videos. It's where now we have 2 different communities that I run online that are on Facebook groups that are free. I go live in both of them on a weekly basis. And as that commitment to putting stuff out there really came into fruition, that's where the business multiplied many times over. So for anyone out there who wants to instill a new sense of behaviors, whether it's content creation, whether it's the fact that here I am, someone who hits the gym 5 times in the morning, not 5 times, 5 times a week.
Man,
in
you
the morning.
you can really get people out.
There's a better figure. Well, it goes to the question as to how does anything become permanent? And the answer applies whether it's hypnotic change work or whether it's personal life. We either create change through repetition or intensity. So on the content creation side, personally within my business, we were chatting about this before we dove on. I said, oh, I've got a resource I can share with you about video production. And I said, let me send it right now. Otherwise, you're never going to get it.
Yep.
Because in my world, if it's not scheduled, it doesn't happen. I caught myself at the fault that I'll embrace, that I created to-do lists to not do the stuff on the to-do lists. And instead, when a task comes into mind, I go to my calendar, I schedule it in. That time is sacred. Now it gets done. So what did I do? I started to block off time in my calendar to start to create the business assets, the videos, the webinars, the funnel sequences that would reach the audience that I knew I wanted to serve. So it was the repetition over time where now without question, hey, that's when we do the live stream in the business influence and persuasion group on Facebook. Hey, this is when we do this workshop, and that's just now set. That's a repetition model. Then there's intensity. So I am right now, I'm short, 5'4". Instead I say I fit more places than most. And in my teenage years, I was well over 200 pounds. You hear of the freshman 15 person goes to college and gains 15 pounds. I had the freshman minus 50. And even in spite of that, at my height, I was still carrying around an extra 30, 40 pounds than I really needed to. It was proportionate. I carried it all right. It's a game on the internet to find older videos of mine. It's the Incredible Shrinking Hypnotist. And Jake, it's the moment where my son was like 2 or 3 weeks old, newborn baby at home. And he, holding the baby, he falls asleep. He's now about to turn 9 years old in a month or two. And I'm at the time, sleeping baby, doing the thing, let's carry him up the stairs, put him in the crib. And halfway up the landing on the stairs, I have to sit down because I'm out of breath. And I just don't feel right. And in that exact moment, just enough was enough. We all know what we ought to be doing in terms of our health, our movement, our eating, and so forth. And yes, we get better at it over time. But in that moment, I'd say mentally in that moment, I dropped the last 40 pounds.
Yeah.
And over the next few weeks and months, it became ridiculously simple because just now, no, I eat at meals and I enjoy the hell out of it. I don't fall prey to the, this is going to strike a chord with some people, the shame eating that, oh, I brought this for you. Oh, well, I'll have a little bit of it. That's plenty. And just the respectful yet assertive way of dealing with what I do. And it became not just behavior now, it became ritual. So any change we create, it's a mixture at times between that repetition over time as well as that intensity. And it's not always an away from. Here's a moment where I was at a convention. It's a convention that still happens, but it's a lot smaller than it used to be. And this goes back to the first thing we talked about here. They're the group that maybe 10 years ago tried to put out the message, online education is going to kill this industry. How'd that play out for them? And because people saw that they were clinging to a very clearly incorrect, outdated theory, they started to move elsewhere. And I'm at this event, and it's like the first year that the attendance had a big drop. And I share this not to go, look how awesome I am and look what I did, or share numbers. Yet I'm hearing that these conventions typically have workshops you can add on as electives before or after the event. And it's the first year that even those pre and post events took a big hit. And the dialogue was, well, you don't teach just for the income. You teach because you care about inspiring the next wave of this community. Well, you don't do it for the money. You do it to increase that impact of the people you help. I have a game that I play in my business sometimes as to list segmentation. Who has this product but doesn't yet have that product? 3 email sequence, automate, let it run. And I traditionally do that when I'm traveling, just to utilize that time and have the business still growing even while I'm not in the business. I'm hearing this dialogue. You don't do it for the money, you do it for the impact. You don't do it for the income, you do it to help people. And I'm watching people who are joining to this date a program of mine that has helped more people than anything else that I do. And testimonials still pouring in of people who invested in that program at that time. And the thought was twofold. One, you can have both. It can be income and impact. And the second thought was, this was the intensity moment. Oh, I don't fit in here. I can still be a part of this community, yet I need to bring in another audience to this way of thinking and what we do. So again, whenever you're approaching some new task, ask yourself, how can we create that repetition? How can we create that intensity? If we're talking hypnotic change work, it's about, let's facilitate that intensity intentionally.
Yeah.
There's a sentence.
The thing here too is, when I was watching Jay Medicine Hat on stage, he brought up about 20 people, and then he's kind of filtered out to like 10 or 8 people who were most, I guess, susceptible to what was going to happen on stage. When we talk about what you do, which is, and specifically around this, the wording and creating influence and really being purposeful, are there times where folks on the receiving end are more susceptible or not? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, have you been surprised sometimes that the things that you're teaching are like, if they fall flat or if they're ineffective in some way, or like, maybe help me kind of understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, by the way, I live by the mindset that frameworks equal freedom.
Yeah.
And if you look back through the conversation we've already been having and what I'm about to do now, I'm always looking to go, how can I answer this specific question, but then also universalize it into something that everybody could benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody out there, whoever finds themselves on the opposite side of the microphone or talking to a client or speaking to a group, steal this formula.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people start to go, oh yeah, but I'm not a stage hypnotist. Click, and they're on to the next podcast. So you'll see where I go with this here. I just wanted to highlight that formula here. Let's talk about the example you gave first. This is where I would say that's a situation where they're there clearly for a different goal. He's there for entertainment. And I will update the story. It was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago that actually the gentleman you've been saying nice things about, and I've always heard wonderful things about him. He did pass away a couple of years. And,
yeah, actually he died a decade ago. He died in 2012. Like,
I was following, right,
yeah. I was following his comedian career after that, because I was like, man, I got to go see this guy again.
Yeah.
And then,
so in that situation, he's there for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And very often they might have to flip the room and do the show again.
Yeah.
Which means he's got to have the clock in mind. This show needs to wrap up. First show's 7:30, needs to wrap up 9 o'clock, because now we're going to clear the audience, clear the tables, bring in a new crew. Next show, 9:30. So in that situation, even as someone who, again, without the self pat on the back, has given the keynote at practically every leading hypnotic convention, has one of the most downloaded podcasts over in that world, I would comfortably tell you there's not one specific hypnotic method that's a match for everybody. It's not the technique, it's the artistry of how the technique is applied to other people. So if he had more time, he could have worked with those other people individually and brought them where they needed to go using another set of techniques. This will correlate to a business application here in a bit, by the way. So, however, he's there for entertainment, and any of those people could pull off the program with anywhere between 3 to 5 people. So it becomes, I hate to use this term, a bit of a numbers game. I got enough. Let's start.
Yeah.
So that's where that's a different situation. this is where, go back through this conversation, anybody who's listening, and you've heard some of the motivational strategies around toward pleasure or away from pain. I've talked about how to structure the call to action to bring people into a call, how to set the frame for a call. And even as someone who, one of my students posted the other day in our influence community, she goes, I just moved my business last year from $33,000 in income to like $106,000. And it's because of this one thing that Jason taught. And I know people who have learned that one specific method and yet maybe modified it over time and adapted it, made it their own, or saw they're in a specific area that changing some of the nuances made it differently. So the mistake people make kind of goes to this story of the stage hypnotist, of using the one method and thinking this is the one way to bring people in. And instead, what have I talked about that I do in the shape of what I do? Here are times that I'm going live in a Facebook community. Here are times that I'm writing these posts on social media places for people to find what I do. Here are times where I find the symbiotic relationship who serves a similar audience that I do, but has a different product, a different solution for those people. Our programs don't compete. We actually complement each other, and I'll do a free training for their community, and that brings people into my world. So really the lesson of this is to recognize people are motivated by different reasons. So it's where, like the stage hypnosis example, here's someone who is incredibly skilled, but in that format, based on the time clock of the situation, has to use one method, and it's reliable enough that chances are some of the comedy clubs he worked, all those people wouldn't have fit anyway. So he has to dwindle it down. The, I think, greatest stage hypnotist working right now is a guy in Vegas by the name of Mark Savard. He's at the Planet Hollywood Casino. And there's a cool thing I've heard him speak about, which is, he goes, I'm casting my show. Here's a moment where he's there for entertainment, and he has this one routine where he had two routines. We'll pair them together for the example. Two women, person I'm tapping now, whenever I come close to you, I am the most repulsive man in the entire world. You think I'm disgusting. You got to do everything you can to get away from me. Person I'm tapping on the shoulder right now, whenever I'm around you, you realize you are in love with me. You are just completely infatuated with me. You've got to get my attention. This bit is only funny because he puts the grandma matronly character as the attracted to him. Yeah. And as his words, the quote, hot girl on stage is the one repulsed. If he did it the opposite way, he's a creep. So in his mind, he's casting the program based on these two routines that he consistently does. And once he has a person who's good for each, all the others can go. So again, to bring this into a business context, though, recognize that this is where market data is one of the best things we need. By going to the market, by testing these headlines, by bringing in different ways of attracting that audience. You can listen to Jake and I chat about this, but the best thing you can do is to start to make those offers to that audience. And this is where you're going to hear exactly what people want. And yes, to have some formulas to make that message more attractive and have them already beginning to sell themselves into what you do. That's where we get the best feedback. So the final point on this is, don't ever say that method doesn't work.
Yeah.
Ask a better question, you get a better answer. How could I adapt this to serve this community better?
Jason, my man, I want to be respectful of time here. You are a wealth of knowledge, and you've certainly shattered my, I don't want to say shattered, but you definitely shifted my perspective a little bit around the power and the value of this. I love the way that you took me through so many different stories around this, and just kept anchoring it back to how to add in your business and the things that you do personally. Where do people find you? What's the best place, most active place for you online when people want to learn more? And what's the best place to get your book?
Yeah, actually, I will point people to the easiest one to remember, because I have a last name that people butcher the spelling. It is Jason Linett. Do your best. I own every misspelling of my last name for the website. So do your best to spell jasonlinett.com and you'll find that they all point to the right place. Even better though, let me share a free training with everybody in your audience. I talked about formulas for presenting content in such a way that your audience will want more from you even before you get to the offer. It's a simple direct training called the Video Influence System, 7 steps. Some of them only take a couple of seconds to deliver. And it's a formula that, as much as it's about video, it can apply to social media posts, ad writing, blog writing. It becomes universal, though I teach it in this free training in the context of video. So my specialty is that of influence. My first name is Jason. So go to jasoninfluence.com. That'll give you instant access to this on-demand training. Then from there, it'll give you links for the book and my website, my Hypnotic Language Hacks podcast. But I say that jasoninfluence.com is the best place to get started, to learn something right away you can put into use and see the impact it creates.
All right. Well, I'm going to drop that link in the comments for sure, along with a few other links to your sites and some of your content as well.
Awesome. Thank you,
Jason, my friend. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for talking about your area of expertise, and wishing you and yours the best here in 2022.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And as I say, change your words, change your thoughts, change your life.
Cheers.